Hey, it's James Langford sitting in my office on Thursday evening in D.C. I want to give you a quick update from a very crazy week in Washington, D.C. this week. There's been a lot going on. We've had lots of questions and phone calls, answered lots of emails. I want to be able to run through a couple of things that have happened this week to give you some quick updates and answer some questions. Posted online yesterday. If you've got some questions, send it to us, and I've got several folks that I want to be able to answer some questions for as well. First thing, there's been a lot of talk about the debt limit, as there should be. We are at $29 trillion in total debt as a country. To tell you how much that's grown, from George Washington to Ronald Reagan, we had $1 trillion in total debt during that entire time. From Ronald Reagan to now, we're up to $29 trillion in total debt. It has exponentially grown over the last 40 years. The reason we have a debt ceiling vote at all, because other countries don't have a debt ceiling vote, we're the only country that does this. The reason the debt ceiling vote exists is to force Congress and the American people to be able to talk about debt and deficit, to say, where are we? Are we going to add more debt? Should we pull back spending? How do we actually manage our spending? That's the reason we do this. But for the last really about 8 years, that hasn't happened. It's just been an extension of the debt ceiling. There's been no debate. It's just been move it again. So once again, we're at a debt ceiling vote right now. Now, this is a shorter term piece that every single Republican is voting against. But this debt ceiling vote, one of the big reasons that we're even having this conversation is because no one wants to actually talk about the debt and how we turn it around. So we've got a debt ceiling vote that will actually happen here in a couple of hours. You'll see every Republican vote against the debt ceiling vote itself, including myself. I've been pretty outspoken on that. And I've laid down the marker to say, how do we actually deal with debt and deficit in the days ahead? When are we going to actually have that conversation about how to be able to turn spending around and what's actually happened? Now, if I go back to last year during the time of COVID, it was like the rainy day. If we had a rainy day fund, it would have been the year that we would have done it, but we didn't even have a rainy day fund. So there was additional debt that was added last year that everyone knew we were going to have to be able to get through this crazy moment. We're through that crazy moment on the whole. Economically, we're back on the right path. Oklahoma has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country. There's a job everywhere you want to be able to go to be able to get a job across the state. Our economy is recovering. There's no reason for all this spending. We've got to be able to get back on top of it again. So I'm going to continue to be able to push that we actually deal with the debt when we get to a debt limit and continue to be able to push against this in the days ahead, including today. So that's been a lot of the conversation today, and I'll talk through some things because there's a couple questions on this that are coming up as well. Lots of questions that are coming in about the border also. Border's continuing to be a mess. It looks like we're going to have another record month that came back from September. Now it's early October. We haven't got the final numbers that are in, but the fiscal year for Congress and for the federal budget actually runs from the 1st of October all the way through September the 30th. That means the fiscal year just ended. As the fiscal year just ended, it looks like we're going to have the highest number of people illegally crossing our border in decades and decades. You've heard a lot of people in the media saying, well, it's the highest number in 21 years. Well, we're going to break that number from 21 years ago. That was this record number because so many people are illegally crossing the border, and it's pretty straightforward why. On January the 20th, Biden changed all the rules on immigration and said President Trump was mean, and so we're going to be nicer to people. And what's happened is we've had a flood from all over the world that's actually come on our border because we're the greatest country in the world, and everyone wants to be here. It's not hard when you're the greatest country in the world. If you don't restrict your borders, people from all over the world want to be able to come. And I understand there are progressives here in DC and progressives in Oklahoma that think we should just open our borders up and let anyone want to be able to come. But that collapses our economy, it collapses the basic functioning of our schools, of operation, all those things. We have 1 million people a year that legally come to the United States, that do it the right way, because we do have the most open legal immigration system in the world. That's the right way to be able to go through the process. But we've had over 1 million people that have been interdicted illegally crossing our southern border, and we've got a lot more that are coming at us, and we don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people that we didn't interdict at the border that were crossing in those desert areas with all this going on. We've got to be able to finish the basic wall construction. That shouldn't be hard. It's already been paid for. The materials are there. Just President Biden's refused to be able to do it. We should be able to handle the asylum claims. Again, this is not hard. This is policy that was put in place during the Trump administration to deal with asylum claims, to be able to have an orderly process on that. Crazy as it may sound, the federal courts have actually stepped in on the Biden administration and told them that they have to redo and put back in place what President Trump had in place for dealing with asylum claims, to have an orderly process rather than just release them into the country and say you can go anywhere you want for the next 3 years. Here's your court date. We have well over 100,000 people that this administration, the only administration ever in American history to do this, we've got well over 100,000 people that they've just allowed to come into the country that we've not done all the work on at all. And they've just said, when you get to some spot, check in at an ICE agent location and we'll start getting you a court date in the days ahead. No administration's ever done that. So we have a very open border. We have people that are crossing from all over the world, and we should have a structured system of legal immigration, but we should push back on illegal immigration. They're not doing it. So I had more conversations again with Ali Mayorkas, with DHS, continue to be able to push on this area. We continue to be able to identify those spots, to be able to get leverage points on them. The courts continue to be able to press on the Biden administration, but constitutionally, the Biden administration has got to do its job, enforce the laws. That's the responsibility of the president. So we'll continue to be able to accelerate into this. We are making some progress and having some areas that they're actually having to close the loop on, but we have a very long way to go on this. I'm proud of Governor Stitt, actually, for going to the border and actually addressing this again and continuing to say every state is a border state when drugs are coming in to every single state in America, including Oklahoma. So we should continue to be able to address them and continue to encourage our Border Patrol, because they've had a really tough time. So when Governor Stitt and others, and I've been down there multiple times this year, continue to encourage those folks, they could use the encouragement. Next big issue that's come up a lot this week, vaccine mandates. This is something I've worked on for a very long time. I've taken a lot of flack from a lot of people on this, that they say, hey, you should encourage vaccine mandates. Listen, I've had the vaccine. I encourage people to take the vaccine, but we're the United States of America. We don't mandate a vaccine on every citizen in the country to be able to do this like it's actually happening right now. 40 million people in the United States have already had COVID, recovered, they have natural immunity. We have folks that are cancer patients and others that their doctor is telling them don't do this. We have others that have religious objections, or others that just have personal objections to this. I encourage you to get vaccinated. If you're worried about the COVID-19, go get vaccinated. It's a great way to be able to protect yourself and your family. But then don't go compel other people to be able to do that as well. So I push back on with employers, with chamber meetings. I've met with the White House multiple times. I've met with the Pentagon leadership multiple times, multiple different branches within that. I've met with the folks that handle the Office of Personnel Management, that takes care of federal employees and federal contractor restrictions. I'm pushing on this every way you possibly can. I've got 2 different pieces of legislation, one that deals with this dishonorable discharge issue within the military, which I think is absurd that they're even discussing dishonorable discharges or less than honorable discharges for individuals in the military if they don't take this vaccine. There should be other ways to be able to deal with that. I'm also pushing on all the mandates on private employers to say private employers have got to be able to make their own decisions on this. There's no reason that the president should be trying to impose his will on the rest of the country and what they're doing. Actually, there's a question that came in actually from Leanne that asked specifically about some of the private employers. You name one of the employers. It's a big one in Oklahoma. I'm not going to call them out on that, Leanne. But she asked, what am I doing about all that? Number one, I'm reminding employers that there is no mandate. There's a speech from the president, but the president actually hasn't put any mandate out on private employers at all. A lot of private employers think he has because he gave a speech and he sounded forceful on it, but the Department of Labor has put out no regulations, no instructions on any kind of mandate on private employers. That's number one. Number two on this, I would encourage you to stay engaged with your employer. Go to HR and say, I'd like an exception. There are quite a few employers that are saying, we're mandating everyone gets it, but if you come and ask for an exception, you're getting an exception. So I'd encourage you to be able to go through that process, and then to be able to work with your union, if you have a union, your particular employer does, to be able to work with your union to be able to do that, or to be able to engage with other folks to be able to say, who's going to represent me in this process? I would tell you, I'm doing everything I can. I've talked to a lot of CEOs and a lot of other company leaders in Oklahoma and other places, and have encouraged them to encourage their people to get a vaccine, but not to be able to do a mandate. So I'm going to keep pushing back on that over and over again. I've also had a lot of questions that have come in this week about the Department of Justice, basically saying that parents that come to school board meetings and that speak their mind at school board meetings now should be investigated as domestic terrorists. That is intimidation use of the FBI. parents that go to school board meetings and speak their mind on any number of issues should not only be encouraged to go and speak their mind, but they definitely shouldn't be discouraged or try to be intimidated by the FBI or the Department of Justice. There's no reason to have physical acts of violence against any teacher or school board administrator, anything like, or a school administrator. There's no reason to do that. But the DOJ seems to be imposing something totally different, that you're under suspicion if you go and just express your opinion at a school board meeting. That is over the line, and that is not what the role of the Department of Justice is. And there are lots of other things that the Department of Justice needs to be dealing with, gang violence and all kinds of other things in our country, but they should not be going and intimidating parents. We should be encouraging parents to stay involved in their child's education, not trying to discourage or to definitely intimidate them. Let me run through a couple of the questions, things that came up. Janice asked the question, why did you vote for the Trump tax cuts that are a large part of the reason for the need to raise the debt ceiling? Are you willing at the country's expense to have an unstable economic outcome and not paying the debts already incurred? So let me make a couple of things clear on this. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that we passed, federal revenue went up in 2018, 19, early 2020. So there's all this misinformation that we did this big tax cut and it led to huge debts and deficits. Federal revenue went up. If you want to go back and check the stats on it, we're welcome to send you the stats. You can email our office or call our office and we'll send you the information on it. What happened was we reduced taxes, which meant more employers started hiring more people because their tax rates were lower. Individuals had lower taxes, probably including you, had lower taxes. They had more money to be able to spend with that, which meant they bought more goods, which meant there were more profit, which meant they hired more people making more money, pay more in taxes. So instead of raising taxes on everyone, we actually dropped it a little bit on everyone across the country. It incentivized growth in the economy. The economy that we're functioning under still right now and the growth that we're experiencing post-COVID is still a feature of that 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So actually, the debt issues are not because of that tax cut. Our federal revenue actually went up during that time period. Michael asked the question, how did you vote for the debt ceiling during the past administration? I assume you mean during the Trump administration, and how will you be voting this time around? I'm voting no this time around. It came up twice during the Trump administration. I voted twice during the Trump administration as well. During that time period, there also was not a serious consideration to be able to take on anything with debt. In fact, there was a negotiation that happened during the last administration where actually spending went up during the debt ceiling time period. I voted against it twice in the last administration. I'm voting against it this time as well. We've got to get serious about dealing with our debt and deficit. It doesn't help just to increase it and ignore the problem. Tim asked the question, why are American citizens being mandated to get vaccines while thousands of illegals are crossing the river daily and not being vaccinated? I would tell you the Border Patrol agents are asking that exact same question. The Border Patrol agents are being mandated as federal employees to be able to get a vaccine, but literally the people that are crossing the border that the Biden administration is saying let them in are not being mandated to be able to get a vaccine. Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection are furious about that. The American people should be furious about that. It's a complete double standard. Tim, I'm glad you raised it, but it's one of the many issues that I've raised. Glad you're raising it as well and continue to be able to press on that. Andy asked the question, have you abandoned your stance about government shutdowns? No, I have not abandoned my stance. In fact, this has been an area I've continued to be able to work on. This is an area I think we've got some bipartisan support on it, and that is to end government shutdowns. I have a bill that prevents government shutdowns. Now, this is not connected to the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is a whole different issue. But the government shutdown issue is if the 12 appropriation bills are not done on time that have to be done by law, if they're not done, then you have a government shutdown in that particular area. It's really government slowdown, but it's a huge waste of money because it costs lots of money to be able to have a government shutdown because you pay people not to work and then they have to come back. There's lots of process that has to be gone that just is money down the hole. So I've worked to be able to end it. My main focus is you shouldn't be able to walk away and have a time where the appropriation bills are not done on time. If they're not done on time, government continues to run, but members of Congress have to stay in continuous session, can't move to any other topic other than appropriations. They've got to be able to do it. It's no different than if your schoolwork's not done during the school day, you got to stay after class to be able to finish it. At least that's the way it used to be when we were actually doing education in schools and people were more engaged on that time. And I hope that people are still doing that now in schools to say it's important to be able to learn our stuff and get our stuff done. So my main focus is If it's not done on time, everybody has to stay 7 days a week session. You can't move to other topics and issues of legislation until this is done. There's a lot of other stuff going on. We could talk a long time because it's been a busy, messy week, to say the least. But I'm trying to be able to work through to actually bring solutions to the issues. I encourage you to be able to work on solutions. In days like this, when we all get frustrated, it's easy to be able to gripe. Griping is one thing, but griping doesn't solve the problem. We've got to actually fix the problems. So when you get into a conversation about issues in Washington, D.C., I'd encourage you to actually say, okay, so if I was there, how would I actually fix that? And to be able to talk through the process to say, what would it take to actually resolve those issues? And to know whatever resolution you come up with, you got to convince 60 people in the Senate and 218 people in the House and the guy down the street at the White House to be able to move on that same issue. Let's work on solving the problems actually together, because we do have serious challenges, but we're still the greatest nation in the world, which is why millions of people are literally trying to break into our country, because we're the greatest nation in the world. We should continue to act like it, and when we see the problems, let's do more than gripe about it. Let's actually get to work and let's fix it. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what our team's actually working on. It's taking each issue and doing what it takes to actually get it done. So God bless you. Keep praying, keep working. Let's keep solving the problem.